I would say a big issue was just overall, ambiguity on kind of not knowing how to approach it next. So I was doing a lot of cold calling, going in person to some places, trying to reach into my network. A big issue with it was volume because you can only make so many calls in a day. At the end of the day, you'll end up exhausting those resources. You had reached out to me and I had said wasn't the right time at that moment. It was a few months later that I reached back out to you because I was getting more into the phase of had a product that I had built and was now ready to really get it out there onto the market, but struggling to get it in front of customers and set up meetings.
And from when we got started, with where you were at, what did you find was one or two things that helped you out?
One was the system that you were able to help set me up with. So actually having, a documented process and steps to follow. In terms of number of leads, well into the thousands and counting. Over 3,000 leads. Right now, the pipeline is around $100,000. Yeah, so my name is Carson, and I'm the founder of Purchasing Pulse. And so, with Purchasing Pulse, what we do is we build models to help companies that are stocking inventory predict how much they should be keeping in stock. So, if you imagine like a distribution center, they don't want to keep too much inventory on hand because it ties up money that they could spend elsewhere, but they also don't want to run out of stock because then they'll upset their customers and lose out on revenue. So we help them find the sweet spot for how much to keep on hand.
Very cool. Talk to me about how did we get connected?
I believe we kind of spoke back and forth a little bit on LinkedIn, and you had reached out to me and I had said wasn't the right time at that moment. And it was a few months later that I reached back out to you because I was getting more into the phase of had a product that I had built and was now ready to really get it out there onto the market, but struggling to get it in front of customers and set up meetings. And so that was really the problem that I was trying to solve, and what you had originally reached out to me saying that you could help with. And so yeah, so we set up that call and went from there.
What do you think was getting in the way back then that when you said struggling to set up some meetings for that product? What was going on?
I would say a big issue was just overall, ambiguity on kind of not knowing how to approach it next because there are, a million different ways that you can market a product and put it out there. And they all come with different degrees of effort and return on an investment that you'll get out of those. And so, for me, it was just, struggling to know what's the best way forward through this and what's a good system to do this effectively.
And tell me a little bit more. What were you trying back then?
So I was doing a lot of cold calling um, and kind of, going in person to some places, trying to reach into my network, which, the networking is of course a good thing, but a big issue with it was volume because you can only make so many calls in a day. You can only tap into so much of your network, so at the end of the day, you'll end up exhausting those resources, and you kind of need a better way to create a system for that.
And from when we got started, with where you were at, what did you find was one or two things that helped you out?
The two biggest things, one was the system that you were able to help set me up with. So actually having, a documented process and steps to follow. Because for myself, I'm a very methodical person. I like to have a recipe, and so it's really nice to have okay, step one at the beginning of the day, do this. Step two, here's the next thing. Um, the other part of it was just the educational component because my background is in engineering. I'm not really at the time didn't consider myself a salesperson, and so just having somebody to kind of give you that instruction and those teachings to help you learn how to become a better salesperson, I think is really valuable. um, there's all kinds of books and stuff, but like reading books versus having an expert actually tell you okay, based on what's actually happening in your business, here's what you should do, is just a world of difference.
Man, I'm smiling because you struck a nerve. I hear sometimes exactly what you said. And I love how you framed it. At the time, I wasn't a salesperson, so it almost implies you've made a identity transition.
Exactly. That's why I changed my wording there.
Yeah, yeah, that's actually exciting to hear. What would you say to somebody who was there that maybe helped you from our work together that can help them make that transition too?
Yeah, I mean, I would say you just have to get out there and go do it. Like a lot of the learning is kind of self motivation, you know, and I think for somebody like myself who hadn't done a lot of sales, it's a very intimidating thing to put yourself out in front of people and try to you know build up this pipeline. Um, but that's really the first step is just to get out and do it. So having someone kind of help you make that first step is a huge benefit.
What do you think was getting in the way for you specifically, though?
Um, yeah, I would say it was a lot of volume. You know, like I was getting out there and doing it, but you know, as a single person team, you don't have a ton of resources, and when you're doing um, you know product development and marketing and sales and the business administration, all these different things, like you don't have a ton of time to just figure it all out on your own. So having somebody give you those steps and that guidance to get you started is very valuable.
Thanks for sharing that. And how did that help you with the volume?
So yeah, I mean one of the aspects of the approach um, was LinkedIn outreach, and you know it's kind of an interesting thing because I feel like the system has a good mix of automation, but also the human touch. So you're able to automate the outreach in a way that doesn't feel spammy, and that was a big concern of mine at the beginning. Like, you know, I don't ever want to send a message to somebody who, you know, it's not relevant for.
Mm.
And so it kind of solved that problem. Like, it's a way to get more volume and have more outreach, and it's kind of running while I can focus on other things in the business, but at the same time, it's high quality, and you know, you're not upsetting people because you're sending stuff to people that they don't ever have an interest in.
I love that. And speaking of that LinkedIn outreach system, walk us through some numbers. What kind of numbers did you see on your side?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of number of leads, well into the thousands and counting, because it's a system. It's continuously providing me more leads, and so um, yeah, it's not really something that I can give a specific number on, but you know, over 3,000 leads. Um, and out of those leads, you know, I've been booking about 2 calls per month, which for my industry, you know, they are it's a larger purchase price, and so 2 calls is actually pretty good and kind of where I want that to be. And the beauty of it is you can always turn it up or down if you want more volume or less volume through there.
Awesome. And what kind of results has that gotten you in terms of any other numbers that you can share?
Yeah, right now the pipeline is around $100,000. So we're working through that, and of course working to you know keep bringing leads into the top of the pipeline as well.
Awesome. And what else from a like how to convert these deals from us working together? Anything else stand out that you found particularly useful?
Yeah, you know, I think the leads are very valuable on their own, but it's not the most valuable part of like what our relationship has been. You know, there's the sales coaching and the guidance that you've given that I think is immensely more valuable. Um, you know, because like anyone who's listening to this, so what Diego does is 3 times per week sales coaching sessions, and you can bring whatever questions you have about your process. We had like I had brought a sales call that I had done, and we watched the recording, and Diego gave me pointers on, you know, you could have done this a little bit better, or this was a really strong point in that call. And you know, just to be able to have that type of tailored feedback, um, you know, I don't know, like there's not a lot of other ways to get that, and that was super helpful. Like again, I don't have a huge sales background. And so to almost have like that kind of mentorship is just super valuable.
Thank you, man. Right here. I appreciate that. And I remember them well. In fact, you did a lot really well. A lot of the guidance you got, I remember, was keep doing these things. Cool. And rewind me to before we were working together. I heard you say that you were trying some things. Um, Kind of on that vein, what would have happened if we didn't get a chance to work together?
Yeah, I think it would have been a lot more work, a lot more of trying things that maybe would have worked, maybe would not have worked. Um, I think that I think that you kind of gave a shortcut to cut a few steps out of the way of the trial and error phase. And so I'd probably be, another year behind where I am now if we hadn't worked together, just because I would have spent a month doing, more and more cold calls, and then, that didn't work. So try something else, and that wouldn't work. Try something else. So it really helped to just shortcut a lot of that process.
Wow. Well, thanks for sharing that. And, outside of business, you already shared some of the numbers, some of the stats, and you're even out in Mexico paragliding right now, which is pretty cool. Um, how would you say this has affected your life just on the outside of the business side of things?
Yeah, I think in general, it just helps more with like the baseline of confidence in the future. Like starting a business is a very big thing to do, and it can be a scary thing. And there's this big unknown of will I succeed or not.
Mm.
And so every little bit of certainty that you can add to that helps you in your personal life. Of like because if you're a business owner, you're always thinking about that, right? So just to have more confidence in that, like, okay, now I've got this sales pipeline where, like, I'm basically guaranteed to close these deals in the future. It it just gives you a lot more what's the word? Confidence in the future, but not being as like nervous about is this going to succeed or not succeed.
I think what you said just earlier was super well said about, as an entrepreneur, certainty is everything. I just riffing with you for a second. I hear a lot of people say, "Oh, entrepreneurs are risk takers, risk, risk, risk," and it's actually quite the opposite. We just try to put it out. And hearing you say that, actually, I think is super, super well said. Awesome, Carson. Thanks for sharing that. Anything that we haven't gone over that you think should still go said?
Yeah, I guess one other thing is that you've also been able to provide a sort of community of like-minded people who are starting businesses and are in similar places. So, part of those coaching calls, there's other people in the calls who are also at the same point in starting their business as I am. And so it was really helpful to talk to those people. And, there were times where we'd set up one-on-one calls, like I would talk to just, someone else who was part of the community. And it's really valuable just to have that, that like support in that group, just to be able to see like, okay, there's other people who are going through this as well, and here's what they're doing to succeed. And yeah, to just have that is a really strong thing.
Couldn't agree more myself. I think that the network aspect was an underrated benefit for myself too, like me personally as well. So I couldn't agree more. Thanks for sharing that. And what would you say to someone who's thinking of working with us with Unlock the ROI? What would you tell them?
Yeah, I think that the space that you operate in is kind of unique because there are like millions of people out there who promise what you promise, that talk about, coaching or getting leads and things like that. And, 99% of them are kind of like bogus, I feel like there's so many people out there that promise value and don't deliver on it. But honestly, I feel like you're the real deal. Like you've got the background, having done this in the corporate world for a long time. You've got a lot of clients that you've helped become successful. Um, I would just say if there's any like skepticism about that because you've been burned in the past by, another sales coach or think it's too good to be true or anything like that, like, I would say you're a quality dude to work with.
Man, I would say that right back to you, Carson. It was an absolute pleasure working with you too, and thanks for the nice words. And wrapping us up here, I'd love to inform people, let them know where can they find you, and if they want to find out more about you and Product Pulse.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, my website's at purchasingpulse.com, and you can find me on LinkedIn under Carson Gross. Um, and I'm actually going through a merger with another startup right now called Convexity. And so, depending on how far in the future you're watching this, you might be able to find me at Convexity.
Very cool. Thank you for sharing that. We'll make sure to include a link to your social as well. Thanks so much for watching, and Carson, hope you find that glass off out there in Mexico.
Yeah, thank you.